This is More Valuable Questions with Chris Kutarna.
So hold on for a sec. Let's just relax our grasp on this concept for a second so we can play with it and experiment with it and make more room in it for people that don't feel like they fit inside of it.
That's Stephanie Lepp. And the concept she's asking us to relax our grip on is truth. Hey there, I'm Chris, and welcome to More Valuable Questions, where my passionate and experienced guests invite you to join them in asking the big questions together. Please do rate and follow and help us to grow this conversation. Now, a lot of people, and I count myself in this group, we get into all sorts of conversations about social media and fake news and how trust is failing in society and the future of journalism and politics and democracy. But Steph is out there playing with the possibilities. She's a filmmaker, she's an artist, and she experiments in that dangerous territory of deepfakes and conspiracy theories. And she challenges us. What if, instead of saving truth from these new tools of deception, what if we just get pragmatic and ask ourselves, where do we want to go? And can these new tools help us to get there? Steph dares us to rethink. Maybe we've framed this whole truth debate the wrong way. I loved this conversation. Her brain is fun. It's playful. It is very nonlinear. Steph explains to me her grand theory. She calls it the fractalicious nature of isness. And she reveals to me why I've been having bad sex all my life. Is practical fiction a better path to truth? Welcome to More Valuable Questions. So how you been?
Well, actually, the last tweet I just posted is pretty honest about being in a semi-permanent state of creative anguish. This is not new. This has been going for a long time, this semi-permanent state of creative anguish that I'm in. It's funny. It's both tethered to reality, it's both tethered to the extent to which I am actually making the things that I want to make. And it's also I do feel a lot better after I have made something. And I learned that probably the most after I had my first child, my daughter. And I just realized that making is part of how I stay sane. So I was I need to even if it was just little photo books of her, I just need to be making. So it's both tethered to reality in the sense that after I make, I feel better, but it's also a little bit untethered. There may be no amount of making that would just
that satisfies
relieve
the creative
anguish.
anxiety.
Yeah. So it's just good to know that. So yeah, and just my best friend who calls me the Idea Factory also calls me a tortured artist. And there's a way in which yeah, maybe that's just it. Some might think that that's an unhelpful way to see oneself, but to me, it's I'm in good company. It's just it's labeling your thoughts, right? It's and here's the creative anguish I have. It's and maybe I'm just a tortured artist sometimes, and that, and then I can remove myself from it a little bit.
It does sound a bit like one of Dante's Circles of Hell. The creative anguish of the artist.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, because it could also that's also why I wrote in the tweet, it is luxurious, it does feel good to have these ideas, just to have them at all. And in my higher moments, I can just be grateful for them. Whether or not I get to create them, I can just be grateful for the flow of creativity that is just pouring forth through me. And as luxurious as that can feel, it can be hellish. Yes. Thank you for acknowledging that. That is also true.
Yeah. I had a flash of kind of being starving in an infinite plane of canned fruit without a can opener, but lots of forks.
Yeah, there's something there. It's there's an abundance. There is an abundance here, and yet unfulfilled, consummated in a way. Yeah.
I get that. I guess, I mean, part of what I often feel anxious about is I find it so easy to start things, new things, and then completing them is this painful journey of saying no to so many new things that occur along the way.
Yeah.
And I'm right at that right now. I'm finishing a novel, and it is both so close, and so far, and every day that I can't, like I jealously create the day to work on it.
Yeah.
And then I feel both satisfied by that and terrified that there are so many more days of that where I'm not going to be doing other things.
Totally.
I'm going to be working on that one big thing.
But at least I feel like I've gone through that cycle enough times to just be like, dude, Steph, you're doing the grass is always greener thing. Because remember when you were doing that other thing and you were like, this thing, if I was just doing this thing, then and then now that I'm doing this thing, then I'm thinking about the next. So it's like I've gone through that enough times to just be like, and I also like write little time capsules into my calendar. Like I'll write myself a note like in the future and of like what I'm feeling. It's like, I hope, and like usually it's like, I hope I do this project or something. And then I like find that little time capsule in the future and I'm like, I did it. But why am I still feeling the creative anguish? Oh, yes. It's because I still just like continue to just grass is greener to myself.
This is, what an unexpected bonus from this conversation. I didn't realize that I have you to reach out to when I need this therapy.
Oh, definitely. I'm with you. I don't know if I can help you, but I can totally commiserate with you.
Amazing. Amazing. I appreciate that. In terms of the space that I want to hang with you in for a little while, I like to imagine that we're sitting around a campfire together, and this is a fire that you've laid. You know, we're in a forest of your inquiry, and to me it's pretty scary because this is all unfamiliar territory.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. For various reasons.
The forest of a tortured artist.
Okay, so that was going to be my first question, which is, so it's your forest, it's your campfire. You know, what name would you give it? Where am I? This forest of your doubts and questions.
This isn't really an answer to your question, but my dad used to call it Stephanie Land. Because he would just catch me zoning out from a very young age, and he would just be like, I'm in Stephanie Land. My daughter finds this very amusing. And she will sometimes find me in Stephanie Land too. That's not really an answer to your question though. You're wanting to orient more in terms of like the kinds of questions, the area of inquiry that I'm in right now. Yeah, not. Okay. Well, I can say, right now I seem to be in an inquiry around truth and epistemology. What kind of how we might relate to truth in a new, helpful, more constructive way that allows us kind of through this quote unquote post-truth kind of like a dark moment we seem to be inside of. But that doesn't really mean anything, any of these words I just said, but definitely in terms of a relationship with truth. That's and with how we know what we know.
So, I think you just said a lot, because as I listen to, the adjectives that you put in front of truth, that it's dark. A lot of those adjectives to me, what I hear, and knowing a bit about all of the work that you've been doing exploring truth, I guess the meta feeling I get from you is a strong sense of dissatisfaction with our relationship with truth today. And maybe that's a good place to start. If you can kind of, can we dig into that a little bit? Like,
sure.
What dissatisfies you? What frustrates you? And to the point of movement, right?
Okay, yeah, sure. So what frustrates me is the is the lack of pragmatism. Is like
Okay.
all this needing to decide what is right and wrong and what is true and not true, and kind of forgetting a little bit of like forgetting like what is helpful? What is our goal? What are we trying to do here? We may not even need to decide. We may not even need to decide whether there is such a thing as absolute truth, which, by the way, I do believe there is. But guess what? You either are satisfied with the house that you built or you're not. You grew the food or you didn't. You healed the disease or you did not. And it's not so black and white all of the time. But like, hey, y'all, like, what are we trying to do here? Like, and we don't totally need to like decide whether, and yeah, sure, I'll just give another example, like whether there is such a thing as race or whether there is not, or whether there is such a thing as gender or whether there is not. Guess what? We don't need to decide. Under what circumstances is it helpful to believe that there is no such thing as gender? It's really helpful to think that way when we're trying to expand the concept of gender. So like, hold on for a sec. Let's just like relax our grasp on this concept for a second so we can play with it and experiment with it and make more room in it for people that don't feel like they fit inside of it. And then under what circumstances is it really helpful to think, to like believe that there is such a thing as gender or believe that there are two genders? Maybe it's really helpful to think that way in the Olympics because biology, blah, 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 blah. Let's make it a fair competition. The goal of the Olympics is not to like make space for, it's not, inclusion exists in tension with other values. And the Olympics is like, we're trying to do something else there. So like, whatever, just to go back to it's like, what are we actually trying to do here? And therefore, what way of like relating to this concept or believing in this concept is the most helpful? So it goes with truth. I think we can be a little more pragmatic about it. And that doesn't mean forever. That just means I think that would be helpful right now. And once a pragmatic relationship with truth has done its job, it's very Ken Wilber. It's like this theory got me to the better one. Once the pragmatic relationship with truth has done its job, we won't need it anymore, or we won't need it as much anymore. But that's what I would say is like, it's funny you get the vibe of dissatisfaction that isn't totally like what but like, I get, sure, I'll channel some dissatisfaction right now. I'm like dissatisfied with what I see as like a lack of pragmatism.
and when I like that because it was completely unexpected and original to my mind. So it's kind of doing that phrase, the lack of pragmatism is kind of like, it's a little bowling ball that's bouncing around and doing all sorts of weird things in my head at the moment. But when you say a lack of pragmatism and, who are you thinking of? Who are the people that are having this, I don't know, highfalutin debate that isn't really helpful?
I'm probably most interested in journalists and nonfiction storytellers because, and I'm actually not frustrated. For them, it's like, I'm actually just trying to help them because they are so scared, a lot of them. And I know I'm like talking about they and generalizing, but like, I think a lot of journalists and nonfiction truth tellers, let's say, are so scared of letting go of like black and white truth because they feel like they have nowhere else to go. What are their only options? If they admit that all this gray, if they admit that like, wait, the vaccine isn't effective 100% of the time, and wait, QAnon, like, it's not a bunch of reptiles, but there are dark forces with way too much power over the world. Like, like if we admit that there's all this gray, what's our alternative? Relativism? There is no truth? Or like nihilism, truth doesn't matter because it's all about power. Like they don't know where else to go. Like from what I can see there, and please, like I really don't know. And this is just like from the limited that I can see, there seem to be three camps. There's the naive realists who are like, don't know where else to go, so I'm just going to pretend that truth is this black and white thing, and like democracy dies in darkness, right? That's the Washington Post tagline. Or like stand with the facts. That's NPR. It's like, okay, too scared to look at the gray. That looks too dangerous. Conspiracy, so like let's just pretend that it's all black and white and like go back to like the previous Enlightenment. Let's go backwards. Okay, then there's the relativists who are like, there's no such thing as gender. It's like just it's like throw out the baby with the bathwater. So it's like and then there's the nihilists. There's like the Scott Adams. I don't know if you're familiar with him, Dilbert.
Of course.
Like, so it's like, you know what, like even if there were such a thing as truth, it wouldn't matter anyway because it's all about power. It's all about like Trump is a master at self-fulfilling prophecy. It has nothing to do with truth. power. So then that's like, well, is that really the world we want to live in? And what I'm saying is like, actually, you're all partially right. It's like, it's all good. It's like, there is such a thing as truth. Sometimes it can be really gray. Sometimes we can just totally let go of it. We can be all relativist about it. And like, sometimes we don't need it. Sometimes, sometimes like, that's what's beautiful about Zelensky's propaganda, is that it's really complicating our relationship with truth. Because we're like, oh, yeah, no propaganda. It's all about truth. Oh, but wait, when Zelensky's doing it in service of peace, or like to support Ukraine, now we're okay with it. It's like, well, basically you just admitted that like under some circumstances, what we actually needed is a purposeful fiction. And that's okay. It's all good. Like we can be more pragmatic, let's say, like we can have like a pragmatic approach to truth that actually like transcends and includes, naive realism, relativism, and nihilism. And so, yeah, who I'm speaking to is mostly, I think, the journalists and the nonfiction truth tellers who are scared of like relaxing their grip on black and white because they don't know where else to go. But their grip is what's kind of getting us into this mess in the first place, because people can smell the gray, right? This is like the COVID story. People can smell the gray. And when the authorities don't admit that there is gray, then people, of course, they run to conspiracy. They run to someone who's like, yo, the situation is more complicated. And let me tell you how that's the case, or, So, yeah. So that's who I would say I'm talking to.
That's so helpful and clarifying for me. And I suppose, journalism as a profession, as a sector, I'm not sure what word I want to use.
Like a
But it
function.
does feel like as a function of society, it does feel like kind of like the sharp edge of the question, right? This is the hard case of, it has this function, certainly in a democratic society, that, we have this theory that we require the fourth estate to kind of, be a check on power, to perform that function of inquiry that helps a self-governing population to make good choices. And so there is something deeply, deeply uneasy about the notion that, well, maybe we don't need that. Maybe we could give it up. And it does feel like we're in this moment where I like how you described it, like, smelling the gray. Like we both smell it, but I'm terrified of the smell. You smell it and you run because we don't know how to. It's like when I look at somebody playing a trombone, and I don't know how to play the trombone, but what I imagine is this kind of panic I would feel as somebody who likes things to be clear, and I like to be specific, to know, where do I put that slidey thing in order to hit the note? It looks like it's just, you go by feel, but I know the beginning and I know the end, and anything in between, it feels like it would be highly, highly unstable. And I'm afraid of losing my way in that instability.
Totally. And but the thing about this pragmatic approach is like, we don't have to be scared, because guess what? Even if it turns out that the universe, that like, it's all just strings, like, it's like, even if it turns out that like, there's nothing really here or whatever, like, as we can go into literally like the weirdest physics theories about the nature of the universe and reality and time and free will and all, and like, and not be scared of it, because again, at the end of the day, what are we trying to do here? What do we want to do? What do we want to be? What do we want to build? And so like, great, let the uncertainty principle, let it all be like the wildest, most confusing wormholes of who knows what. And also like, I do want peace in Ukraine. So therefore, like, it doesn't have to be like I don't have to be scared anymore of.
Right. Okay. So, oh God, I don't know where to go in this forest right now, because there's a couple of pieces that I want to bring into this, but I guess, but like, first, let me just, since we started this conversation with me unloading my deepest fears and anxieties to you, so help me through this dark tunnel I feel I'm in, because pragmatic sounds helpful, but it also sounds like, well, it's complete. It really can collapse into relativism, right? Because whose pragmatism are we talking about? If I'm President Zelensky, then it's
Totally.
perfectly pragmatic to talk about the ghost
Yeah.
of Kyiv, right? Like that kind of
Yeah.
that fabled air fighter pilot who was downing all of these Russian
Totally. Yeah.
aircraft, and it didn't actually exist, but it gave a morale boost to people. So to your point about kind of like it's a helpful fiction that helps us in a critical moment where we're being attacked by this other country to feel like there might be hope. Shift to a Russian perspective or maybe a Chinese perspective, and we're thinking about the geopolitics of NATO expansion in Europe. And it's totally pragmatic for us to demonize Ukraine in order to continue to support Russia's military objectives and, maintain its hold on Crimea and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because that's the objective that I want. And I imagine that would be how, the Pulitzer Prize winners would feel like, no, we can't be pragmatic about the truth because as soon as we are, it becomes this thing of, reality is whatever I believe hard enough. And
no, because there is still truth. Like there is still, I guess there's two things I would say. And one is like, who should we help, or what does helpful mean is such a different question. It's such a different question. And I think better question right now, right? Than like, not than what is true, but like if that is the question that we're asking, like that would be, whatever, this is so meta. It's like, what is helpful is the helpful question to ask right now. But I do believe that, because that's kind of what I think we have a little bit lost sight of in this like clenching so hard on truth. We're like, like democracy dies in darkness, like quick, like eliminate misinformation, do all the fact checking possible. And then it's like, relax your grip for 1 sec. What do we want and why? And sure, like, and like, let that be the discussion. I mean, that is democracy, right? It's like collective governance is the like age old challenge. Like lean into that challenge, lean into that. That sounds like a very worthy place to lean into right now.
So this is exactly why, I really wanted to have this conversation with you, because I feel like the territory we've covered, go into sort of any media theory class in any university, truth and propaganda, everybody is just kind of having this debate about what is truth, and is it a post-truth area, and what is objectively real, and what is socially constructed. And what I see you doing is kind of wading into the gray and experimenting with these new tools of, pragmatic truth to sort of test your hypothesis that sometimes, if I relax what fit the criteria of the past, do I actually get a better outcome? And, and so I went down a deep rabbit hole, which was totally fascinating and sometimes a bit disturbing, of your Deep Reckonings project that you've done. So, and I'd like you to talk a bit about that, but, just to preface it a bit, sort of taking people in society, like a Supreme Court justice, like Alex Jones, a conspiracy theorist, and putting, using algorithms to put words in their mouth that they didn't say, but to create a video of them saying it, and studying the effect of that upon different audiences. And I thought it was just like a stunning example of, okay, what if we wade into that gray space that people are terrified of, but with the sincerity of, I'm doing this for a purpose. And so there's an integrity of, here's my purpose, and here I am using these new pragmatic technologies of a deeper truth to achieve that purpose. Anyway, I've said too much, but could you just sort of wander into that space for a bit? And
yeah, sure. And I love that you say experiment. I love that. It's like, that sounds like such a great orientation in general. It's like, let's experiment. Let's try things. Let's try relating to truth in different ways and see what happens, and like see what is helpful to us as we continue to evolve our understanding of what helpful even means, and helpful to
Right.
who, and may the who continue to grow bigger and bigger until it includes as much of life as possible, right? As far as I'm concerned, that's kind of the goal. It's like grow the team bigger and bigger until it includes as much of life as possible. Or said another way, align the well-being of the individual with the well-being of the collective. But anyway, okay. But to go, to go into deep.
Tell me a story. Tell me a story. I'm not sure which story you want to tell me. But I was fascinated by all of it.
You're bringing up with, I can just mention what it was and then go in the direction you're pointing at. Which I love this direction, which I would consider the direction of co-creating reality. So Deep Reckonings is, because the plot thickens for journalists. We'll get there in a second. But Deep Reckonings is a series of deepfake videos that I produced that imagine morally courageous versions of our public figures. So you can now watch Mark Zuckerberg having a crisis of conscience. You can watch Mark Zuckerberg, Brett Kavanaugh, Alex Jones, and Donald Trump. And the videos are absolutely explicit that they're fake, not just because I'm not interested in misinforming anybody, but also because part of the power of this medium is that you can know that it's fake and it still influences you. Right? In the same way that a virtual reality experience or like virtual reality therapy, you can know it's fake and it still helps you overcome PTSD. So this is not misinformation. I'm not making these people look like fools. I'm actually really trying to imagine. And yes, it's me trying to imagine with my biases and my ideas, but this is my homework assignment to myself is, what if this person actually underwent a reckoning? What wisdom would they come to that would be helpful for all of us to hear? And so the question that this project explores, and I mean, I could talk about it for a long time, but the question that it explores is how can we use our synthetic selves to elicit our better angels? And so it's this question of purposeful fiction. Like, can I create this purposeful fiction of myself that inspires the version of me that I would aspire to be? And like, if we were to take a simpler example, it's like, let's say you're nervous of public speaking. You make a deep fake of yourself giving a TED talk and watching it over and over again. You're like, oh yeah, I can do that. I mean, this could go in a million directions, but just to take the thread here. So the plot thickens for journalists, and this is connected to this, because part of what this project is exploring is the extent to which we co-evolve with the stories we tell about ourselves, whether those stories are fictional or non-fictional. That has always been the case. Okay, we have always co-evolved with the stories that we tell about ourselves. What feels different now, and what we have kind of more powerful tools to do, to use now, is that we are becoming aware of this phenomenon, that we co-evolve with the stories that we tell about ourselves, and therefore we can more consciously guide who we are becoming by telling the stories that we need in order to become, whatever it is that we want to become. So the plot thickens for journalists because, they are not just talking about the world. They are shaping the world. And so there was this very wonderfully awkward episode, just to give an example, of The Daily Show. The Daily Show is the New York Times flagship podcast, daily news show. And they had this this episode at the beginning of the 2020 election season. They had this episode where they invited the editor of the paper. So it's Michael Barbaro and Dean Baquet, the editor of the paper. I don't know if that's how he pronounces his last name, but they're doing kind of this post-mortem on their 2016 election coverage and talking about how did the
they got it
New
all
York
right
Times coverage? Well, it's they got it all right, but it's also how did their coverage influence the outcome of the election? Because they really threw Bernie under the bus. They made Hillary seem like the obvious front runner. I think they actually used the term front runner, or it's the words that they chose and the frames that they gave. And then Michael Barbaro says this. He says this comment oh well, chicken and egg influence an outcome. And then they keep talking, but they really dance around this this phenomenon that their coverage of the election influences the election. And what do you do with that? What do you do with that responsibility, like with that awareness that the way that you are talking about the world affects the world? Like, how do you steward that responsibly? That is a great question. But that to me is like the question you asked about, like, well, who is we and what is helpful? Like, to me, that is the question that needs to be asked now, rather than like, well, we're just reporting the facts and what are the facts? It's like, how do we take responsibility for the fact that the way that we tell the facts and the facts that we choose influences what happens?
So what's really interesting about that is, so it seems to me that this relationship that journalists have with the world, that, you know, my observing the world creates the world that I observe sometimes in a case like that. At
a high enough level of influence, there's definitely more to contend with. Yeah.
Right. So this is not new to sort of the digital social media age that we live in, it seems to me. What's new is that we're kind of more conscious of it because so many of us in society are aware of that feedback loop and gaming that feedback loop. So, you know, in the age of mass media, you know, we did sort of take this grand concept of truth and turn it into a recipe, right? So basically, you know, put anybody in a lab coat, you know, a bunch of numbers, repeat to the audience enough times, and truth is what comes out in society. You know, and sometimes we'd use that to justify military activities, and sometimes we use it to sell products to people. But, you know, we have this formula through the medium of mass media to manufacture truth. And it seems to me that, you know, postmodernism actually emerged in the mass media age. You know, scholars of media saying that, look, you know, truth isn't what we think it is. Truth is just socially constructed. Truth is the narratives that the elites decide serve their interests best. And so it kind of had this sort of frame of, there are those people up there with the power to manufacture these mass discourses, but that's not truth. That's, you know, at least not as we pretend it is. It's something more kind of more chemical, more manufactured, more industrial than that. And then it seems like what happened in the social media age is everybody got a hand of that formula, right? And so it kind of worked.
And the result is Tower of Babel.
Well, that was a great article by Jonathan Haidt. Or the result is the funhouse, right? Truth is whatever, you know, whatever me and the group of people that I assemble around me, we all agree is going to be real for us. And so we're all playing that game now. And it seems to be part of the frustration, or maybe just the kind of the big challenge for society is, can we get enough people to still play the previous version of the game that we can kind of have some shared, coherent, okay, that's a foundational thing.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I would just say, like, bring on all the games. I think, and this is the pragmatist in me who's like, under what circumstances do we play which game? Again, like, when we're trying to expand the concept of gender, it's really helpful to act like it doesn't exist, or just blow it out, like just socially construct, you know, it's just like, because we're trying to make more room here for, we don't even know what, but we're like growing through something here. So let's just like give ourselves a little more room to do that.
Right.
You know, and then in other circumstances, so it's like, bring on all the games. Let's just like choose which game for which context and who's let's and blah, blah, blah. And, but like I, you know, like at least I think we might have a easier time agreeing if, rather that, like, I think it would be harder to agree on like which game is best and easier to agree on like, what's the goal of this circumstance? Bathrooms, Olympics, whatever circumstance we're in, like what is the goal here? What are we trying to do here? And therefore which game best serves that. I and call me crazy, but I do think we would have more of a chance of agreeing if that were the way that the question was framed.
Yeah, I like that. Maybe I've become cynical.
You might, and
like
you would be very forgiven.
or
if you
maybe
had, because
maybe I feel, without getting too much into politics, maybe I kind of feel scarred by by some of the things that people have been able to do successfully with, by playing this game, frankly, better than I can play it.
Yeah.
And so there's definitely an aspect there. Like if I could maybe, take a kind of, fantasy fiction angle on this, right? So in the old world, I'm not like, I'm not the highest priest, but I was kind of a high priest, right? I've got all of these degrees behind my name, famous academic institutions. And, so if I go back to, and I didn't live then, but I go back to the 1950s, 1960s, I have magic, right? I'm a spellcaster. I can say things and it becomes true for people. And that's just the power to cast that spell.
Yeah.
If I go around now, it's like my spell book doesn't work anymore.
Totally.
I have lost the magic. But other people, it's like they have found, some kind of like older, deeper witchcraft. It's like in Harry Potter when Voldemort says, when Lily Potter sacrificed herself, it was old magic. I didn't understand it, because I learned my powers at Hogwarts, but there was something deeper and more elemental that was acting. And there are people now who know how to like stick their hands into the earth and summon up that elemental magic to move people in a way that, my spells can't do.
Yeah.
And so part of it too, and I think journalists have that, we're kind of floundering for.
Totally. You're right. It's hard to let go of power, or it's hard to feel that you have been like relinquished of your power. And so there's definitely an interior dimension of this that needs to be tended to. There's a whole much more complex and beautiful world waiting for you. If that's any consolation, like here's what I can say. Like,
good. Keep
here,
going.
okay. So I have this kind of like thought. This is like very politically incorrect, but let's just go with it. So this whole
You've come
idea
to the
of
right
like,
place.
okay, great. So there's a similar thing in Me Too, let's say, all over the place, everywhere where power dynamics are changing. It's hard for the people losing. Yes, that sucks. It's a shitty experience. And also like, where are we trying to go? But let's just take Me Too as a context. Like, it's like if you've been someone who your spells have worked and they no longer work because now you have to ask for consent and blah, 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 and please the other person, blah, blah, blah. Well, guess what? You were totally missing out. You were totally missing out because you thought you were pleasing her and you were not. I'm just going to be like stereotypically heteronormative about it for a sec. Like, hey, player, you thought you were pleasing her and guess what? She didn't enjoy it at all. You were not learning anything. Don't you want to learn how to please her better? Like, check it out. Like all that stuff you were doing that you were like casting a spell and whatever, like you were missing out on the fullness of the beauty of the person who was in front of you. Don't you want that? Wouldn't you rather experience, like, even if it means you have to like figure out how to feel macho again and figure out how to like be okay with yourself. And this goes for like so much right now. It's like, whether you were a coal miner, I'm sorry to be so like stereotypical, like if you felt really macho coming back from the mine with like sweat and whatever dirty all over, and like you like came home and like brought home the bacon, or like you were the man, you were like the dominator in bed, or like whatever, like yeah, it's gonna feel like you lost your spell book, but like there's so much more complexity here if you're able to like experience some uncomfortable emotions for a sec. There is a more complex world waiting for you.
I think you've nailed how to frame it.
That's my pitch.
No, I think that's a brilliant pitch, right? To say to these journalists who you feel like they have this consternation, not willing to be pragmatic, like, look, you've been having bad sex for decades. and it could be so much better.
Totally.
I mean, I think that's
That's
going to get a
great.
lot of people, I guess knocking on your door and say, okay, Steph, so what do you know that we don't know?
This is like Dr. Ruth, the second coming of Dr. Ruth. Wasn't Dr. Ruth the sex doctor?
Absolutely. So, I was pushing you a bit earlier because I kind of want to tease out like the hard parts of this, but I will, if I can kind of roll back 20 minutes to, so your deepfake videos and just a personal data point. So I watched one of your deepfakes, and this is Brett Kavanaugh, who's Supreme Court Justice in the United States, basically giving, as you say, a reckoning around, I guess, sexual exploitation of women.
It was really how he responded to the
how he responded to it,
because we don't know what he did or did not do.
So this is a random weird fact about me, but I am an absolute fanboy of the U.S. Supreme Court.
Oh, wow.
And
that's good.
I listen. I'm so
Nice.
sad. I mean, yeah. So things change. People leave. Characters leave the court, and I go into a deep depression because I listen to almost every oral argument. I just
Wow.
I just
That's
love.
awesome. Wow.
I mean,
that's so
admittedly,
cool.
I loved it more in the past, but I just love the sparkling language often of all of these trained legal minds. And I'm not a lawyer. I have no legal training, but I just find it fascinating. So for me, I get quite worked up about changes in the court composition. I was quite worked up about Brett Kavanaugh specifically, and watching that video that you made for me was a cathartic experience. And why is that? Because I know it's fake. It's like the placebo effect, right? I know that the pill is a placebo, and yet I take it and it still has
the most underutilized tool in all of medicine, actually, is the placebo effect. Yeah.
So, so that's my personal data point, that I'm willing to believe that there is better sex if I can figure out how to navigate that gray in a way that, I don't know, somehow at the end of the day creates a better world for me to live in, where, we can play with fictions to have a better outcome. A good example, I don't know if you told me this example or one of my researchers told me the example of, there's this Middle Eastern satire site called Al Hudud. Have you heard of Al Hudud?
No.
Oh my God. So, I mean, it's a brilliant example of fiction. I mean, and they're quite upfront about it, just like you are. Like, this is fiction. But the reason that we are satirizing with this fiction is that, it shows that we are smart. We're fun, smart, tolerant, approachable, and authoritarian regimes hate that.
Totally. Are you familiar with Birds Aren't Real?
Well, because you mentioned it. In prep for this conversation. So we'll do that next. You had to tell us a bit about Birds Aren't Real, but let me give you, I'm just going to read you. So this is the Al Hudud site. Yeah. So there's an article. I mean, you have to check it out, and we'll put it in the show notes.
Okay. Yeah.
So here's one of my favorite. This is from last year. So the headline reads, "Latest protesters can't afford fuel to light themselves on fire. Tunisian government reassures Arab leaders."
Oh, God. It's like The Onion.
Yeah, the government pledged it would not be responsible for another wave of Arab revolutions, saying it had learned the lessons of past upheavals by deliberately worsening the economy to the point where ordinary citizens no longer have enough money to use their burning bodies again to show their displeasure. And,
God.
Yeah, it's The Onion, but Middle Eastern version of it.
Okay,
and
nice. Good. I'm glad to hear there's some humor.
Because it's poking holes in systems of fear. Is what it's doing, and it's using it. It's not looking for truths to do that with. It's manufacturing completely fabricated stories. Yeah. Where if you're reading it, there's a deeper truth in it. A kind of there's a cynicism in it. There's an awareness of how the landscape of messages that they ordinarily swim in is full of propaganda.
Totally.
And it's making fun of it.
So you're not going to win there with facts. You're not going to, like, that's a great example of like under what circumstances. Like, guess what? In those circumstances, you can throw all the facts you want and they're not going to get you anywhere. So guess what? Let's try some humor. You know, at least we can give ourselves some comic relief / like poke holes, right? Because that's what the regime like doesn't know how to react to. It knows how to react to facts. It reacts to facts with its own counter fake whatever, right?
Right.
But it doesn't know how to react to this.
It only knows how to take itself seriously. And the more seriously it takes itself, the easier it is to satirize, and the more biting that satire is. Is that kind of what's going on with Birds Aren't Real? So I don't live in the United States, so it feels like it's something I occasionally read about, but I don't actually have any experience of what this is.
Yeah, and I haven't gone too deep into it myself, but I find it so brilliant. It's a fake conspiracy movement started by a young guy who he kind of had the opposite story of it's like his parents were in some kind of, I don't know if it was like I can't remember, but they were like very, very taken with certainty about some ideology. And he kind of actually like found truth on the internet is where he found other ways of thinking. And it was actually on the internet where he kind of like relaxed his certainty. And he was at a Trump rally in, it was like 2016. And it was just at the Women's March, I think. And it was just like, everything just felt kind of insane to him. And so he grabbed a sign and flipped it over and drew on the back the first 3 words that came to his mind, which was "Birds aren't real." And he just held up the sign and acted like he really believed birds weren't real. And he was like proselytizing and telling people, he's like, birds are just drones that are designed by the government to spy on us. And, you know, and he attracted people, and people started following him. And it just turned into this whole thing. And now it is literally him and another person's full-time job is to run Birds Aren't Real. They have amazing swag. It's like, and you see these you see these like billboards that say birds aren't real. And then there's birds on them, of course. And the whole thing is just like hilarious. It's amazing. It's hilarious. And they call it fighting lunacy with lunacy. But I almost see it as more than it's like fighting misinformation with to me, it's almost more. It's like it's admitting that we don't always need truth, right? It's like you can just imagine the mom being like, "But son, you know that's not true," and the son being like, "Mom, that's not the point. Like we know it's not true. That's not the point. Like the point is to have a good time. The point is to just like cope with the insanity of this moment. The point is to like relax our relationship with truth, maybe for a second, and see where that experiment with relaxing our relationship with truth and see where that goes." And to people who, I just also want to say, like to people who I imagine there might be listeners who are going along on this ride and thinking that this actually sounds exactly like relativism, but it's not. It's not. It includes it makes enough room to be able to include relativism and absolute truth and, you know, but it's not just relative. But at least for the sake of Birds Aren't Real, yeah, that is a great experiment in relaxing our relationship with truth and like having fun with it.
So first of all, when you say relativism, I feel like that's above my pay grade. That's a good example of like, you know, a philosophical concept that I should understand. And you would be embarrassed to, well, I'm not embarrassed about it anymore, but there's so many things that I should know and I don't understand. But I guess if I had to try to articulate what I'm hearing you, like the distinction I'm hearing between your words, between a kind of, you know, intentionally relaxing truth in order to, you know, pragmatically do something.
Yes.
The key word that keeps ringing in my mind is sincerity.
Oh.
Or maybe integrity. So for example, you make a video of Brett Kavanaugh saying something that he didn't say, but there's a sincerity in what you did. You said, I'm gonna create this video with this intent, and then the video serves that intent.
Mm-hmm.
Insincerity would be somebody, giving testimony in a congressional hearing and saying what they know people expect them to say,
Yeah.
but they don't actually believe it.
Totally.
And in the future, they act differently from how they said. I can think of an example in my mind right now. So that's the
totally. No, you're totally right.
That's the insincerity is the stuff that, to be crude, fucks it all up.
Yes.
And turns it into.
You can tell. Oh no, go on.
No, I've run out of steam. I don't know where to take that up.
I'm so glad. No, you're totally right. I'm glad you're bringing this up because you can test whether the thing you achieved, the thing you did, the extent to which the thing you did achieved your stated intent for it, right? You can say, because then people are like, oh, well, how can you tell the difference between good faith and bad faith? It's like you state your intention, you do the thing, and then we can actually measure the extent to which you achieved it. And if you completely failed, well, then guess what? We're going to hold you to your stated intention, or you get to admit that wasn't actually really your stated intention. But we can, that's where like there is truth. Like either you achieved, how well did you achieve the things? And actually that might be a good kind of segue to, the original thing that we were thinking of talking about, if you remember, was this concept of the fractalicious nature of isness.
Right.
Which I obviously need a better brand for that.
Well,
but
we can crowdsource that.
Okay, so we can, I need a better brand. We need a better brand. Fractalicious nature of isness. Let me explain what it is and see if you have a better idea for what to name it. Because what you're bringing up is, okay, if we relax, we have our way of finding truth. It's reliable. If we relax our grip on it, how will we know that we got to truth? And did we get to truth? And what if we don't? Okay, so I have a hypothesis that because right now we're doing, I see, I'm not going to name any names, but I see this like, like if the map is not the territory, let's gather as much data as possible in order to know something. The point is like, let's make the map as detailed as the territory as humanly possible so that we know for sure that we figured out the truth, in this moment of fear, let's say. And this is actually, it's not only coming from fear, I think it's also coming from this whole development around sense making of just like, how does one make sense of the world? How do we make sense of reality? Like, let's look at every different perspective on an issue so we can get like the 3-dimensional version,
right.
Okay, so
you've got my complete attention because I talk about this a lot and now you're going to blow it all up.
Okay, so however, how would it possibly be the case that we would have to like know first of all, we only have 5 senses, so it's like there's an infinity of data that we are not tapping into at all,
right,
it's like,
right.
What can we know, so like, and it's like, my hypothesis is that, okay, so the three sisters are corn, beans, and squash, right? So throughout the history, Mesoamerican history, people grew corn, beans, and squash together because they grow really well together, because the corn becomes the pole for the beans to climb up, and then the squash shades the roots of all of them, and the beans fix nitrogen for they grow really well together. And so, and then we, like scientists came along or whatever, and they're like, wow, check it out. Can you believe that they also give us complementary nutrients? And it's like, those two things are not unrelated. Remember? It's like because they grow well together, that they give us complementary, like we're all part of the same thing here. Like we didn't have to like go and figure out somewhere else. It's like the fact that they grow well together told us all the information that we needed to know about them, which is that they make sense together in our bodies too. Like we didn't need to go, like, good job going and figuring that out. But like what you figured out is almost,
well, now we know it through
like
this method of
now
knowledge
we know it
too.
through that, but then we might as well just call it art and not like, it's like, that wasn't something we needed to, it's like, it's beautiful. Well done. You did like a beautiful proof or whatever, but like, let's not pretend that like we needed that data or something in order to know something that we could have easily just known by like just looking at it. And so the fractalicious nature of isness, like I'm gonna bet that Zuckerberg could have predicted the consequences of Facebook. I'm gonna bet that Ford could have predicted the consequences of cars. You can call me crazy, but like I think that like things manifest themselves at multiple levels of organization, from the microscope to our eyes to the telescope. Like it's written all over the place, whether we're hearing it or smelling it, like it's there. And so we don't need all that data. I think we need a fractal, like a chord. It's like playing a chord on a piano. We need a couple of keys, and as long as they sound good together, we have enough information to go on. I know that sounds like very, like, how do you know if they sound good? It's like, because it's a chord. There are chords and there are not chords. Like if your ear is well tuned, like you also want to be healthy enough to know the difference between a chord and a not chord. Like I've probably been in certain places in my life where I couldn't totally tell the difference, but that's also my work to do. Like I want to be able to know the difference between a chord and a not chord. And when I hear a chord, it's like I'll just throw in one last concept here. The concept of synergistic satisfiers. Have you heard this term?
I have now.
It's really great. So you would consider, like, the three sisters are a synergistic satisfier because they solve multiple problems at multiple scales. It's like they solve the problem of fixing of like, not depleting the soil.
The nutrients that they each need, and the shade and the nutrients.
It's like, I think all we need is a chord to know when it's a synergistic satisfier or not. And Mark Zuckerberg could have known all the way back then, this is not going to be a synergistic satisfier. I can maybe make it into one someday, but the way that I'm designing it right now, it's going to have all kinds of quote unquote unintended consequences, which are just a misnomer of my failure to think systemically, of my failure to actually listen for a chord.
So can I summarize? So the fractalicious nature of isness, I like this, is to say that we don't need to collect and digitize and process and analyze all information in order to have a good sense of
what to do.
What we need to do is find a healthy system at any scale and learn what makes it healthy.
At multiple scales. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Why is that family healthy?
Yeah.
Why is that country healthy? Why is that village healthy? But the point is to look for a healthy system and understand the principles that cause it to have the property of health. That's probably going to be more valuable than
that's great.
Knowing everything. Did I get it?
Thank you. Yes. So now what would you call it?
Well, that'll cost you extra.
I'm willing to pay.
But it would be great. Yeah. It would be great. Here's a conversation that I would love to have. We might have to make this happen. I can imagine you giving the fractalicious nature of isness kind of hypothesis that you've just given it. And then, having many people from different perspectives offer their own experience of the truth of that, of the system. And because I would think that, it's not like it's just, find the lowest or simplest system, because there's complexity all the way down, as the complexity theorists say. But we all work in a system, and that would be quite interesting. Where my mind is going there is we tend to be very stovepiped in, okay, I work in finance. Well, I work in health. Well, I work in education. And sort of our jobs define so much of the epistemic universe that I consider relevant to help me understand.
Yeah.
But if instead it's like, I've got a healthy system.
Yes.
In finance. Oh, okay. Well, I've got a healthy system in health. Oh, you guys should talk.
Yeah, totally.
Because you could learn from each other.
And the thing is, the healthy thing manifests itself in finance and in health and whatever. So get these government departments talking to each other, please, because poverty is bad for your health, right? Because it's all, and like in the spirit of experiments, like I think what I would love to do is like, is actually test the Occam's razor, like test the what is the minimal we needed to know in order to have made this good decision? Did we need to know all of that? Like, again, you're welcome to study all of that, like call it a work of art, but like, let's not use funding that's going towards problem solving to fund the work of art. That's a totally great work of art.
So to come back to our original campfire,
I love art. I'm also an artist. I should also say that.
Okay, I can't back that up. So I'm just going to be happy for you and stand in awe of your artistic capabilities, of which, I mean, I guess there are things I could say, okay, that's art, but now we're expanding. Now we're blowing up the concept of art. Pretty radically. I don't know if you consider my flip charts art.
Yeah, no, I mean more for those who, and again, I'm not going to name any names here, but for those who think we need as much information as possible in order to determine the right course of action. I'm saying like in my grad school, like I almost wanted to write an antithesis, like the thesis to be like, we don't need any more like how many more theses on this topic do we, it's like if you ask, and Bush was president at the time, and it was like, if you ask George Bush, like, how much more information do you need on climate change in order to do something about it? None? Oh, because you're not going to do anything about it anyway? Great. Thank you. We don't need to find more information anymore. So it's like that. It's like, if you want to go off and look for the information, fine, but let's not call it doing something about climate change in the Bush era, because that's not, and this is like a really blasphemous thing to say. And like, let's experiment. Let's experiment. What did we actually need to know in order to determine the right course of action? And my hypothesis is we needed a chord. We needed something to show itself to us at different scales of organization to know it was a synergistic satisfier or not.
That's a powerful example, going back to sort of the role of our stubborn grasp on the black and whiteness of truth, because probably an insincere delaying tactic was to say we don't yet have enough information to make policy decisions on the scale that you are talking about. You're reaching for a truth that you don't have appropriate access to through the procedure that we've established allows us to say that. Or at least I'm going to claim that you need more evidence. I'm like, I could be convinced, but I'm not convinced yet. And so the edifice of truth becomes a convenient sort of escape mechanism for people who don't want to accept truth from that process. And that's the only process, because I can always raise the bar in that process. Some of the ways that you're talking about is kind of like the truth in art, the reality of that chord. There can be shortcuts to sort of undeniable truth. Totally. And that can be incredibly dangerous if I never want to expose myself to the possibility of a shortcut.
Yeah.
On this.
But what's beautiful about the shortcuts, by the way, and maybe this is where we can conclude, is that they kind of re-enchant the world, right? It's not like our brain versus, it's like trying to get all the data as possible so we can make the right decision. It's like, we're all part of something together here, which is why the chord sounds good to my ears. It's like the signature, there's this old, I forget the Doctrine of Signature or something. There's this old book about herbs. It's like, if it's yellow and it grows by water, it's probably a diuretic. It's like we co-evolved with all of this, life, all of these, of course it would be the case that the plant knows how to communicate with us in the language we can understand. It's yellow and it grows by water. Okay, thank you for letting me know. So
I know you got to go. But before I let you go, so what I want to do is, so we're going to host this conversation. We're going to get people to bring, in the fractalicious nature of business, people to bring the healthy system that they are learning truths from. And then I wonder, what if we bring journalists into that conversation?
Sounds great. I don't know if they would be that interested.
But it's to talk about.
It'll be the brave journalist.
To talk about healthy knowledge systems.
Intrepid journalist. Yeah.
Yeah. What can we learn from these systems about a high functioning, healthy knowledge system and how we get there, and just kind of come at it a different way. Because I imagine when they get together just themselves, it's a very different conversation around that edifice. And this is, I love how you said it kind of brings back the, what word you just used? The magic, not the magic, the mystery, the enchantment.
Oh, enchantment.
The enchantment of the world. Maybe they'll give us a hug at the end of that.
That's the goal. That's the goal.
That's the goal.
We can gauge whether we achieved it. Did Chris and I get a hug from a journalist or not?
That'll be it. Yeah. Stephanie, thanks so much for this. I've really,
Thank you.
enjoyed this walk in Stephanie land. It's been it's been pretty incredible. I appreciate it.
I'll let my dad know. Okay.
Bye. Bye. So Steph and I caught up afterwards about this conversation, and I asked her, so what invitations do you want to make to you, the listener? And of course, she broke convention and she gave you two. So here they are. The first is to explore more this concept of practical fictions with her, to hang in the gray with Steph, as she says, and to help her discover ways to arrive at better outcomes by relaxing our grip on truth. Her other invitation is to help her explore the fractalicious nature of isness, which I came to understand as learning from the small about the big picture. If you dare to go deeper into Steph's forest with her and other listeners on either of these, go to newgeo.org. The link is in the show notes, and you can do a few things right away. First, please do send Steph some gratitude. Just tell her, thanks for that. I know she'll appreciate hearing from you. You can also vote to grow this conversation and get involved in whatever comes next with Steph and other New Geo members. And you can also link through to her bio and to those fantastic deepfake videos she's made and other projects. I'm your host, Chris Kutarna. Thanks for bringing your energy here and for drawing Steph here with the power of your listening. Please do rate and follow us and help us to grow this energy even stronger. And I hope you'll join me again here soon on MVQ.